mind here, I'd imagine. So good to meet everybody. It was quite hard to sort of think through around where I wanted to drill down and where I could possibly be useful. So David and I spoke yesterday, and I've got a talk that I give, which is basically called Everything I've Ever Learned About Cold Calling, everything I know about cold calling. Right, it's a big topic. I'm sure you can feel it. Everybody's got their own beliefs around it, right? Everyone's got beliefs around what it's designed to achieve. Everybody's got beliefs around what it's supposed to look like. Everybody's got views and perspectives on whether or not it's even ethical to be cold calling people in 2022. However, I've been in the game for 23 years now in go-to-market and software selling and high-value business selling, and everything comes in cycles. Everything comes in cycles. Everything's seasonal. The one consistent motion underpinning everything, and the one thing that separates high performers from low performers at top of funnel in particular, are people that are consistently committed to using the phone, having conversations and executing a consistent talk track and a process. 23 years, nothing's changed from that point of view. So we see a lot of trends, we see a lot of data, we get obsessed with the next big thing, whether it's intent data or ABM or how to write the perfect 16-step email sequence. But knowing how to design and structure cold calls so that you're effective at it every day is essentially where most people are going to be successful every day. So I'm going to take you through some slides. I'm not normally a slide guy, but it kind of annotates the conversation in the direction that I think it needs to go. It's about 12 minutes. You're going to hear my voice a lot in those 12 minutes, and then we'll just leave the last sort of 15 minutes or so to conversation. Is that okay?
Perfect.
Awesome. All right, okay. So what qualifies me to talk about this? Well, apart from having been an operator and a sales leader for nearly a quarter of a decade, I work for a really interesting company, Connect and Sell. And Connect and Sell does one thing really well. It drives a volume of dials that most people could only ever imagine, and numbers that are so big they sound unbelievable. But just to put into context what we've achieved over the past 15 years and why we've got a data-led approach on the conversation is we've displaced about 1.5 million rep hours over the course of 14 years. We've executed north of 250 million dials. We've used 12 million of those dials in our own business to grow from 0 revenue to 50 million in 15 years. We've had 3.5 million conversations alone in 2020. Last year, we were closer to 4 million conversations driven through our network. We've seen about $36 billion in pipeline flow, and we've worked for over 300 companies. So the data tells us this one thing: we're definitely qualified, and we've definitely got more than 10,000 hours of experience here. Me personally, similar sort of thing, right? I get asked this question an awful lot, and I'm basically looking at it from a data-driven point of view. Why cold call? Why even cold call today? Well, the real reason is this, and this is the one thing that most people don't seem to understand at all, which is that trust, intimate trust between me and another human, can only be built in the human voice if I'm trying to establish trust with somebody in less than 30 seconds. Email doesn't get me there. Social selling on LinkedIn doesn't help me build trust in anything close to the amount of time I need to build trust with another human being. Only the human voice can do that. Now, the reason why that's true is because the human voice transmits a certain number of bits of information per second. It's something like 20,000 bits of information per second. For an email to establish the same equivalency, you'd need to send about 100 emails in order to transmit the same amount of emotional information that can respond straight to the part of the brain where humans process that part of the brain which tells us whether or not we're going to believe this human being about something. An email just simply can't get us there. The other thing that I've learned about cold calling is that all great cold calling follows a very simple structure. Now, this isn't about method. This isn't about methodology or sales framework. It's about structure. And every great cold call follows a similar shape. And it looks something like this. You probably see this every day in your work. So I might be preaching to the choir a little bit here. But There are 4 key competencies within every single cold call that you should be focusing on. The first 7 seconds, how to win that real estate. The battle is won in the first 7 seconds about whether or not somebody's going to speak to you. Then it's about delivering value. Now, I know you've had Sean Cease and Ryan Rezart join you for some of these conversations recently, and they'll have a very similar anatomy. Opening 7 seconds, delivering the value statement, what's in it for you, them as a prospect. Not being scared to ask for something, the calendar, the meeting, the referral, the context. How else can I be useful to you? And then lastly, it's about being prepared for the things that are undefined, managing those expectations with the prospect, setting the right cadence of follow-up, and then ultimately managing objections as they emerge. The real vehicle for effective cold calling, lesson number 3, tactical empathy. It's essentially the mindset that you have to have when you're having conversations with strangers, because let's be clear, every single cold call we execute is fundamentally to somebody that we've never spoken to before. So how do we create that trust? Well, we have to have tactical empathy. And this aligns to the first 7 seconds of that conversation. Now, in that first 7 seconds of the conversation, there's high impact learnings from the FBI, hostage negotiation, things that aren't selling that can teach us a lot about effective calling. What do I mean here? Well, think about this. 90 to 98% of all cold conversations fail for most reps today. And why is that? We're solving the wrong problem in a first conversation. If I was going to ask somebody in the room to unmute themselves and answer that, what do we think the wrong problem is that we're solving for when we first speak to a prospect? Why do we lose them? And why do 90 to 98% of our conversations fail? Anybody can answer, I don't mind. Just let's get a pulse on this.
I'll try and answer that, because we go in with a preconceived idea of what we want to sell to them instead of actually listening to what they're needing.
Okay, that's a good answer. Anybody else?
Yeah, I was going to say a similar thing. Do we fall into the script pitched kind of strategy straight away?
That might be a component of it. I'm going to build on that a bit more. Those are 2 really good answers. Let's just get one more for variety before I do my reveal.
I just want, hi. I would have thought that we are putting too much effort selling the product itself as opposed to just selling the demo, to being, we're there to sell a demo, not a product necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big part of it, Ricky, and we'll definitely build on that, and you're thinking the right way. In fact, all of you are thinking the right way. But the real problem that we typically see is this. Every time any one of you makes a cold call to somebody today, you're the problem. Not that you can solve a business problem for somebody immediately. It's not that you can execute on this perfect script. It's not that you can bring this magic pill or bean to somebody that they didn't know that they needed. You've got to solve the immediate problem, which is you. Okay, you're an ambush, you're a stranger, they've never met you. Let's think about that quite deeply for a second at an emotional and a cultural level. Back in the mists of time, before humans civilized a bit more, early humans were highly tribal. I was painted horizontally, somebody else was painted vertically. I had a bone in my nose, somebody had a plate in their lip. If I was coming across the river late at night in my canoe, I wasn't bringing Budweiser and Boerewors and Bryes. I was bringing domination and chaos. So the fear that sits inside the human brain, even in 2022, anytime we meet a stranger, is real. It goes back to those primeval, baked-in genetic DNA experiences that our ancestors had thousands of years ago. So if I call Ricky right now, he's never met me before. Now he seems like a good dude, but I'm a stranger. He doesn't know anything about me. I've got to solve that problem immediately. And that's why the first 7 seconds of a conversation are so important to anybody. Solve the invisible stranger problem. You then earn the right to go on and solve the value problem or the business problem for somebody further down the line. Also, if you solve this problem, it improves one other thing. It proves that you're trustworthy. Now, if I think about that structure, those 4 components of the, well, well executed cold call, what's it ultimately doing at a deep psychological level? Well, it's taking the prospect from fear, that invisible stranger state, to trust, because I'm asking for permission. I'm not imposing myself on somebody, but at the same time, I have to back up my request quickly. And then I'm taking them to a curious state. Curious state is essentially where we can go and do what Ricky wants us to do, which is the right thing to do, by the way, which is sell the value of the meeting. We don't need to sell the product ever in a cold call. We should just be selling the value of the meeting. That's the thing that we care about the most. So let's think about that and just reframe and review what we've discussed so far. Cold calling is the only thing in the world which has a superior way to build instant and immediate trust with somebody. However, to do that, you need to follow a structure to your call. 4 parts. First 7 seconds, value or curiosity, creating moment, the ability to ask for something to conclude the conversation, and the ability to field questions and manage turbulence. Now, the real reason why a lot of cold calls fail is because we address the problem the wrong way around, and we don't accept the fact that we're an ambush and that we're a stranger, that we've got this deep, scary, deep psychological component attached to our very being in that phone call. So we need to eliminate that. And then if we do that well, guess what? We're moving somebody from a fear state to a trust state very quickly, and we're moving them from a trust state to a curious state very quickly. So in well-designed cold calling programs, all of your architecture, the script, whatever you call it, the message or the framework, should probably have components of this attached, because it will just help you see more success from the conversation that you're trying to have. Now, if I think about it further now, what do we mean by this? Well, it means that our cold calls get to be relevant. One of the things that you probably find in your business, just by the virtue of your business, is it's hard to scale personalization, right? You know, I can go on the internet and I can find 62 information points about David Zeff. Choosing which one's relevant to David Zeff's hard. So I'm probably going to pick the personalization component that I think makes most sense, but it's always going to have a bias attached to the thing that I like as well. So if David likes dogs, I like dogs, my outreach could be peppered with the fact that we both like dogs, but it's lacking business relevance. But if I can make a conversation relevant to David around business growth, an objective, a challenge that people like David seem to have had before that I've been able to solve, well, that's generally superior for a first cold conversation, because I don't know enough about David to know whether or not his love of dogs is actually a love of dogs or not. So what do we want to do? Well, we want to index relevance above all things, business relevance. What does it mean? Well, it means this. The second major reason why most cold calls fail is because every single cold call that we execute today generally leads us into a trap of our own creation. Imagine a world where, I don't know if anybody hunts, it's probably a bad analogy in 2022, but I lay traps. I forget where the traps are. I become a victim of my own trap. That's what often happens to us in cold calling today. So let's think about that and why it happens, and why this is the most common objection once we get into our value proposition or breakthrough, which is this: we're okay here. A derivative of that, we're fine. No, we're good. Now I'm just going to pause there again and open it up to the group again. Ask 3 different people. Why do you think that is typically the number one objection we see in the world?
I think one of the biggest objections is indifference.
Okay, that's good to know. What's the sort of provenance of that belief? Why do you believe that, Michelle?
Because I think that is a common go-to when people say we okay here. They're not necessarily listening or contemplating how you can assist them. They just have an indifference to what you're presenting. And at times it's an easy get out the call, we okay, I'm indifferent, which I find is actually harder than an objection, because generally an objection you can overcome. But somebody that doesn't have a belief or a inkling to understand that you could assist them, or that you're offering of something value, just is indifferent.
Yeah, no, I think you're very, very, very close to the point there, Michelle, which is every time we do this, we're surprising somebody. We're surprising them with 5% of their attention, by the way. Is guess what? We've caught them actively engaged in another task. So that's part of the battle. Anybody want to build on what Michelle's saying here? Let's look for another 2 years as well.
I also, I believe that we haven't created the need. We've got to create
Value.
that need, and we've got to explain the value, but in the shortest possible amount of time, because we've got to pique their interest, or else they're just going to say, oh, I'm okay, thanks, I don't need this. So I think that's got a lot to do with it, and a lot of connection.
Yeah. So we're starting to graft the perfect Venn diagram to explain this. We just need the last piece, because Michelle, Nikki, those are both brilliant answers.
What about their time?
They're just too busy.
Asking them actually if this is the right time to speak to them, because you want to get someone when their mind is available to you to listen.
I'll build on that a bit later, because it's an interesting point. I'll give you a little sneak preview on it though, there, Renee. It's kind of like this. If we allow people excuses to leave the conversation by asking them things that are easy for them to agree with, then they're always going to leave the conversation. The psychology is interesting, right? People want to get out of conversations with their dignity intact. Nobody wants to look like an arsehole or belligerent or super mean. So we give them opportunities to leave conversations with their dignity intact. Now, from a technical execution point of view on the cold call, the reason we see a lot of that are for the macro reasons that all three of you have just described, but it's actually something a lot more precise, because our messaging's bad, and our messaging's bad in a very specific way. And the specific way our messaging is bad is that we talk about our product, our technology, our category, or our service before we've even told them what's in it for them. So if I call Renee and say, I've got the best widget under the sun that's been verified by all of these amazing analysts, and we work with companies that look like you, the chances are that Renee's going to ingest that information and quickly process it and go, oh no, we're fine. We're covered. We've got something that looks like that widget. And that's the number one reason why it's an easy default for executives to say we're okay, because we've not created curiosity about what the thing that we sell them can do for them. We talk about what the thing is. We become easily recognizable. So 90% of cold calls are drafted and scripted by marketing executives. Marketing executives love defining their product, service, technology, or category. So that's one of the major reasons why this fails so often for people, is because we talk about ourselves too much, not about them enough, even when we're pitching. So what does that mean? It means a couple of things. It means this. It means that when we get through that, we have to be very cognizant of this one thing. We can't really let the marketing or product people build our talk tracks anymore. The reason that that's so important is this. It's the parable of apples, okay? If I was going to have marketing write an Apple cold call script for me, this is what they'd probably ask me to include in the cold call script. Renee, I want to talk about our offering, apples. Apples are a popular fruit containing antioxidants, vitamins, dietary fiber, and a range of other nutrients. Due to their varied nutrient content, they may help prevent several health conditions. Apples come in a variety of shapes, colors, and flavors, and provide a range of nutrients that can benefit many different aspects of a person's health. For example, they might help reduce the risk of cancer, obesity, heart disease, diabetes, and several other conditions in this article. Learning more about the nutritional content of apples and how may they benefit a person's health. Do I have your calendar available so we can have a discussion about this apple thing? Or you could write something interesting like this that actually appeals to an outcome. I think we've discovered a breakthrough which ensures you shouldn't ever need to see a doctor again. And the reason for my call. Stark contrast. Stark contrast. Now, here's the thing. Most people hate this belief. Most people hate this. And I don't mean script in the sense that you have to follow every punctuation point. But your conversations need to have guardrails. They need to be scripted. They need to be designed, because calling is potentially the most strategic part of a long-term go-to-market strategy or plan. Now, if I think about David's business, your team's business, what's it about? It's about building long-term, medium-term, and short-term value for your customer by helping them identify the right people to speak to. But if we believe that calling is strategic because it's where our most intimate message in the market meets our customer for the first time, then that has to be something that's in control of the company and something that you want to test against. And that's why scripting is so important. but the right type of scripting. It has to have the precision of brain surgery, but it has to have the broad effectiveness that can impact the entire market. So scripting's a good thing. The right type of script is a good thing. The other reason why it's so important is that scripts can give immediate feedback on what works, what doesn't work. If we go back to the Apple analogy for 1 second, right? The Apple analogy where there's too much complexity, well, there's always destined to fail, but you need evidence of that because people are emotionally wedded to the script. And sometimes you need to measure that stuff, right? Anybody who executes on the phone today needs to be aware of why this stuff is important, right? It's channel, it's feedback loop, it's product, it's things that sellers can push back into the company to say why certain things aren't being effectively deployed, or why people aren't taking meetings, or why people aren't interested in having conversations. Guess what? You do that at the right volume, the right scale, your business, you're immediately helping your customers' products and value services become better each and every single time that you execute the script. Now, here's the other thing that I love. Every cold conversation has an outcome that can have a dynamic and high value impact, even if you don't set the meeting today. What do I mean by that? Every conversation has information that you can complete against. Sean and Ryan might have discussed this with you, but here are the most common objections or most common outcomes that you can actually build value against. Yes, I'll take a meeting. No, I'm not the right person to take a meeting. No, I don't want to work with your company for a variety of reasons. It could be reputational, it could be unlocked into a 5-year contract. No, I'll never buy anything that looks like this ever. No, I'm not interested now. Each and every single one of those outcomes, if we do our job well, using that type of structured approach, is going to give us a completed conversation. Completed conversations shorten the cycle. What do I mean by the cycle? It means identifying when people are going to be buying from you. So cold calling is strategic. It's not just spray and pray. The last lesson, you can curate market dominance with cold calling. Why? 3% of any one of your customers' markets are buying something that looks like the thing that you're selling them today. But if I can spend my time in here identifying the people that are open to buying from us, or the people that haven't thought about it yet but are curious, this is how I'm really, really going to provide my customer in your business model with the highest value impact from the execution that I offer them, which is a cold calling at scale. And then lastly, I think there's a lastly, here's the other thing that we've learned. And we've taken this data with McKinsey. We engaged with them on a couple of initiatives at the outbreak of the pandemic. And this is what we looked at. Top performers favor cold calls over cold emails. Across 40,000 deals analyzed, telephone calls were superior for getting people's initial attention. In fact, high performers relied on cold calls more than unsolicited emails. High performers made 82% more cold calls than low performers, and they sent 26% fewer email in order to originate business opportunity. So that's my sort of 12 and a half minutes on everything I've ever learned about cold calling.
Gerry, I think firstly that was just brilliant. So awesome stuff. I think we wouldn't mind spending 12 and a half hours learning what you've got here on cold calling. Yeah. But this is just super eye-opening. There's a lot of really key points here. Some things that I think that we know as a team and that we work on, some things that I think many of us are learning for the first time, which is what this whole initiative is all about. Guys, I highly recommend that we all go and follow Gerry on LinkedIn. It's just constantly puts out provocative, forward-thinking, innovative approaches to the world that we live in. Yeah, very honestly, just thank you very much for this time. Really appreciate it.
Really appreciate it. Hopefully somebody got something from it. David, what I'll do is I'll send this pack out for everyone. And what I might do, I might even sort of take down some of my good and bad tools, if that would be useful. And then I'll just package that up so you can actually listen to the examples of why this works, why it doesn't work, and where I fail on it. And that might just sort of colour in it a bit and rather take it from slide words and theory to actual practical application. Because everyone can deliver this, but actually showing it in evidence is important as well.
If I may ask something quickly, I know there is a psychology to selling on a face-to-face level. Is there something to be said as well about the tone of voice? Because I've noticed your tone of voice as you're speaking, it holds attention, and there must be something in it in terms of the telephone call as well, because that's all you have.
Absolutely, it's all you've got. Like, scripts are pointless if you don't imagine this. Scripts, see a script as a surfboard, right? The surfer has to control the surfboard, right? And they control the surfboard with their voice. The voice is about intonation, inflection, tone, hitting the right notes, right? That's the real key to this. Like, I can listen to somebody in a cold conversation, and you can hear the inflection. It can go up or it can go down at the wrong point or the right point. Something that subtle can make a massive difference. But I've had to work on it, Renee. It's quite interesting. I'm deaf in one ear because of a childhood illness. I have laryngitis. So for me to actually modulate and control my voice is really, really hard. So I basically do a lot of work on some apps that you can speak into. Otter.ai, for example, is free to use on my phone. I'll go back and I'll do voice exercises. I'll pitch, and I'll get it to reflect and play stuff back to me so that I can maintain control of that. There are some people that are just really naturally gifted at it. The one book that I recommend to anybody who's curious about that question, Renee, it's not a sales book, right? Go out and find a book called Prepare to be an Actor.
I was going to say it works for singers, so yes.
Prepare to be an Actor, right? And that should basically tell you everything you need to know about cold calling without it becoming overly littered with sales analogies and sales stuff. And I'll find the link, Dave, and I'll put that in my follow-up email to you. Okay, it's a fantastic read, and it just gets you into the right mindset. Because we're in theatre with this stuff. You're performing in every single conversation all of the time.
Amazing.
Gerry, I know we've run out of time, but just a quick question. What does your first 7 seconds to a cold call sound like?
Hey, Michelle, I know I'm an interruption. Can I take 27 seconds to tell you why I'm calling, please?
Great, thank you.
Oh, I love it.
Yes.
Great. No, I'm an interruption. What else can I do for you?
It does help that you sound super smooth on the phone, you know.
Yeah,
you got that voice.
All right, everybody. Jerry, if it's okay with you, if we reach out, questions, stuff like that. Amazing, guys. I really appreciate it. Let's jump over to the whistle.
Everyone.
Thanks,
Jerry.
Gerry.
You are the best.
Bye.
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 Ciao.